Well, good morning from North Carolina, sunny North Carolina, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, and thank you to Rob and Judy for inviting me to be part of this talk. So as I was invited to participate in these talks, the idea came to me that there is a connection between the quest for women to have equal rights in society and the quest for ELT professionals to be considered as part of a professional. And that is the central idea of my presentation today. I want to show you how those two movements can learn from one another, and I will unpack this for you in the next few minutes, and I will end with a call to action. So this next slide shows the beginning of the women's movement in history. It spanned several decades, and it started in the 19th century, actually, and it's still going on, as you know. And those women were marching to get the right to vote in society, the right to vote and the right to run for office. And it took several decades for them to win. And nowadays, I would say that most countries in the world, women have the right to vote. There are still countries where it doesn't happen yet. It hasn't happened yet. Now, this is taken from the 60s, and this is yet uprising of women called, in this particular time, it was called the Women's Liberation Movement. And at that time, women were mobilized around the idea that women were entrenched in specific and very rigid roles in society. And there were things that were acceptable for women to do and things that were not. I'm a product of the 60s. I became a young adult at that time, and I greatly benefited from the work these women did. But naively, perhaps, I thought that the rights that were acquired, the rights to take risks, as the previous speaker explained, and to step out of our traditional roles were permanent. Well, they were not. I learned that very fast. And what happens is whenever there is progress, there is backlash. And nowadays, still, you should know that about 130 million girls in the age to be in school do not have access to education. And that was, of course, symbolized by the movement created by Malala Yousafzai. Now, it is really interesting, the dynamic that happens when there is backlash. There is also an uprising again for progressive values. So this picture was taken after the latest backlash we experienced in the United States in the form of the presidential election. And now that I'm no longer in a formal role in an association, I can express my opinions as an individual. But we are living in one of the darkest periods, not only for women's rights, but for all other kinds of progressive issues, immigration and the environment. So This picture was taken the day after the latest presidential inauguration. I cannot bring myself to name his name still. But what's really inspiring about this picture is that the women from all different parties and belief systems got together and marched in the streets of Washington, New York, in all major cities in the United States. And this gave rise to a larger movement of women being much more vocal about their conditions, in fact, across the world. So these movements have all been, in a sense, generated by this latest backlash. And I find that very inspiring. Now, what does this have to do with the English language teaching profession? So my belief is that there are, as I said, there are similarities between the two movements. And let me explain what I mean by the movement in terms of the ELT profession. The English language teaching profession is, as you know, mostly represented by women. It's not exclusive, but we are representing the profession. There is an unfortunate fact in society, and that is that when a profession is considered feminized, it is also devalued. And that means that we are engaged in a struggle to have our profession recognized as a high status profession on par with other professions, such as the medical, the engineering, the legal sectors. Why aren't we in par with these other professions? So there is a similar struggle that is taking place. And my call to action for all of you is really to, and not just for women in ELT, but also for all ELT professionals, to really become much more engaged in working towards elevating the profession through policy and advocacy. We represent a field that has its own body of knowledge, expertise. We have researchers among us. We have excellent teachers and teacher trainers. So we need to elevate our voice the same way women have been elevating their voices over the decades. And policy is particularly interesting to me because we have been very shy about affirming what policies are needed for us to be considered as professionals, for us to do our work in the best possible conditions. And that means higher salaries. It means better conditions for us as professionals and for our students. We have to step up in that area if we really want to effect change in society. The women's movement understood that, and we have been able to effect policy changes. So similarly, I think we need to do this in the ELT profession. We should not wait to be invited to the table, but we should invite ourselves to the table. And there is an interesting phenomenon in any movement that is trying to effect change against the dominant culture. And that is that it requires enormous effort. It requires a grassroots effort. It requires a collective effort. And my call to action to all of you is to really become more engaged, with your professional teachers associations, because they are the best equipped, with your help. Without you, they can't. But with you engaged, they can actually help advance this movement to raise the status of the ELT profession as it should be. And so I don't care if it's IATEFL, TESOL International Association, or any of the local affiliates and associates associations that are in your area. And if there isn't any, create one. But you do need the support of an organization to do the work. And so that is my call to action. I will encourage you to work together, to work at a grassroots level, to organize and to sustain the effort, because you know that backlash always comes to you. So prevent it, anticipate it, work with it. I think together we can do it. And I will end with the famous quote from Margaret Mead that most of you have heard many times. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And we will. Thank you very much.